Welcome to Grounded, the podcast by Inspiring Thyme. Today and this entire month, we are actually talking all about growth. And what better way to start a growth month than with the very things that help nourish our planet. And so today we're talking to a beekeeper. And would you say that's true? Are you and your husband both the beekeepers?
Yes, we are. We both are very involved and hands-on on the keeping of the bees on our property.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, y'all, this is Amy Eng, where we live here in the South in Alabama. We've only been here for a year. So when we get going, our son has severe seasonal allergies, and I like to find local honey. I've heard that it has all the healing properties, especially, and you know, there's both sides of the fence on that, but personally for our family, it really does help when seasonal allergies start to flare up. So I'm going to let Amy Eng share her background and her story. However, I do want to tell y'all how we met, which is kind of funny, because if you've listened to me at all, you know that I need people, I need connections. And I reached out to a local group and said, okay, where do I find the honey? Where do I find the local honey? And they said, oh, you have to go to Eng Land Honey. And I said, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to find them. Well, being that it was the midst of winter, and we're going to get there here in a second, stocks were completely out.
Correct.
So I was bummed, but that's okay. I said, how about you come on a podcast? And she goes, okay.
Why not?
This is all over Instagram, and it was so much fun. So we met for coffee, and here we are. Now, before we get started even further, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube or the podcast, please do. Leave us a review. Let us know how this has affected your life. We love the feedback. It's super exciting and helps us curate different content. So, guys, here's Amy.
Well, hello. I'm Amy Eng, and I am the owner of Eng Land Honey here in Pike Road, Alabama. It is a small hobbyist honey business that my husband and I started. But before I get into all of that, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I am a transplant to Alabama. I am originally born, raised, educated in Indiana, and finished up my psychology and speech language pathology degrees at Indiana University. Have worked as a speech therapist in medical settings for 16 plus years. And at that point in time in my life, I had moved up the corporate ladder to being into hospital administration. Decided at that point in time, as a wife and a mother of 2 teenage girls at home, that really wasn't what I wanted to be doing anymore. I think sometimes we get so caught up in climbing the corporate ladder, we forget to stop and think, is this really what we want? So about 5 years ago, I was very fortunate that a nonprofit that I had served on the board of and volunteered with approached me to come work for them, the Alabama Head Injury Foundation. And it was at a place and time in our life that we could do that. So I stepped down from administration, went to work for a nonprofit so that I could be at home more with my kids. And looking back, it afforded us the flexibility in our schedules to start Eng Land Honey shortly after.
And I love what you said right there about, I think as women, now men feel this too, but I'm speaking because I am a female, but I feel like we hit that spot in life where we go, oh man, is this really what I thought I was going to be doing? And I think at that point, some of us do have the luxury at that moment to go, okay, what can we tweak? What can we change? And I love that that's how you started the bee business. Okay, so I'm dying to know.
Okay.
So you've stepped down. It's a great time. How in the world did y'all pick beekeeping? I mean, that seems like you needed a little bit of like, I like bees or something.
Sure. I grew up in a rural community in Indiana. My parents actually owned the local feed store. So I grew up around farming, agriculture. My husband is the complete opposite. He grew up in New York City. In Pike Road, some point in time in the past, we wound up purchasing 90 acres. for kind of our own personal recreation. We had some stocked ponds there. We'd go and spend the weekend there, doing some camping. But we wanted to do more with the property, more with the land. I am an avid gardener, love gardening, love flowers.
That's why we connected so well, I think.
And I had noticed when I was putting out my gardens in the Pike Road area, we didn't have a lot of pollinators. My gardens weren't being as successful as I thought they could be or should be. So we started researching bees and beekeeping. My husband was looking for a hobby. We wanted something that we could do together that was going to bring us outdoors, get away from sitting in front of the TV at night.
Right.
And
boy, did you not know what you bit off.
Exactly. We wound up taking some extension classes offered by Auburn University in their beekeeping program, and just fell in love with it and decided, let's give it a go.
Okay, and on that note, extension service is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I know that my parents in East Tennessee use their local, and I grew up in 4-H, so we're very familiar. Christopher and I actually went to Mississippi State, which is also the land grant school. So that extension service is phenomenal. So plug in if you're looking for agriculture.
Absolutely. Plug in. That's where we got started. Great seminars. We could zoom into it at night from the kitchen table and learn. So we decided to move forward with it. So in 2016, that Christmas, I bought my husband our first beehive as his Christmas gift. And so spring 2017, we put it out at the land, and we've been growing ever since.
Wow. Okay. So that's the background, and that's how you got started. But when you did you know that this was going to morph from just hobby and kiddos enjoy, like just family time? Or did you know in the back of your mind you wanted to do a little bit more with it?
We did not. This was truly just going to be a hobby for us. So we thought we'd have 1 or 2 hives out there. It's something that we would enjoy and that we would reap the benefits of the honey for ourselves, basically. But after the first year or 2, we just kept expanding the hives. Naturally, as the hives, we would split hives. We just kept going and going. So then it got to the point that in my formal dining room, I had boxes and boxes of jarred honey and no outlet for it, because you can only sell so many jars of honey to your next door neighbor or the people you work with. So that's when we got together and we said, okay, we've got to do something with this. And we decided we're going to be drowning in honey.
House and home.
So we decided, let's go for it. And we formed Eng Land Honey, and kind of a play on words and the use of our last name, and created our little business.
So since I'm just getting into the entrepreneur, well, not just, but really amping up, this is very near and dear to me, because at the very beginning, it's hard. So you have a hobby, and usually mid-30s, 40s, you start thinking, am I in the right spot? The kids are moving on in life, and not as much hands-on. I haven't hit teenage years yet, though, so I'm sure it will be different when we get there. But things are progressing, and you take the hobby and go, wait a second, I could actually build this. Okay, but now, what are the first things that you have to start looking at when you're wanting to actually put it out there in the world? Right. Logo, brand?
Yes. First, we started with just a good old Google search of what in the state of Alabama do we need to do for a business license, tax ID number, getting all of that set up so that we made sure we were doing it the right way. So we found that the state of Alabama was very easy to work with, as hopefully most states are. Everything is online, forms are there, we submitted everything. We got our business license to the town of Pike Road. They were absolutely wonderful to work with.
Out of all the states that I've been in cities, Tasha is the best.
She is delightful. And whenever we email back and forth, she always throws a bee pun in there for me. So, I mean, it's getting to know the people that you're going to be working with at that level.
And she's a connector now.
She is.
And that's what small business and entrepreneurship is all about, are the connections.
Absolutely.
The connections, that's what it's all about.
So once we kind of got all of the legal things taken care of, really it was about finding how we could plug ourselves into the community and making sure we're doing it the right way. So again, extension offices, they offer some great opportunities and classes for farmers or entrepreneurial people. So I wound up attending one for cottage industry kitchens because I thought, well, if I'm going to be doing honey, do I need to be cottage industry certified? So I went through the certification. Of course, when I get there, the first thing she says is, if you're a honey producer, this is not the class for you, but that's okay.
You enjoyed it anyway.
I enjoyed it anyway. I've got my cottage certification, so if I wanted to bake or cook out of my home, I could. So again, just a little bit more research, finding where we needed to be, creating a logo. I will be honest, we are probably on our 4th generation of our logo. It is constantly changing and updating as we define who we are.
Yes,
absolutely. Our first logo was something that we kind of, I truly believe we bought it off Etsy, which is a great place to start.
And don't overthink that, right?
Correct.
If you're a beekeeper, a bee or a hive.
Correct.
Keep it simple.
Keep it very simple. There are wonderful, talented small businesses, graphic designers out there who are willing to work with you and put something together, or already have something out there that is editable for you to purchase and get started. So we started with that. And then our last graphic that we have, my daughter, who is a sophomore at SCAD in Atlanta, actually designed it for us. So we were able to incorporate family in that way. And then really it was thinking about who our ideal customer was. And my one piece of advice to anybody out there looking at starting a business is invest in yourself and reach out to people who know the business world. I did not know the business world. I knew healthcare. My husband is a physician. He didn't know the business world. He knew healthcare. So we were able to find, thankfully here locally, a woman who was into marketing and social media marketing and took some of her classes, and through that able to better define our brand, our customer, and how we wanted to market our product. So her name is Elizabeth Ellen Digital, and she's on Instagram, and she's wonderful to work with.
I too, you have to start small. You wouldn't want to take out a business loan necessarily just to get a digital brand going. You really need to kind of fill it out, find your purpose, find what feels good. And then once you have that information, I think that's when you press forward with a little bit more in-depth help, because you know what? Google and YouTube are priceless.
Very, very good.
But maybe not the best information if you're not checking dates on there. So if it's super outdated, you got to be careful.
And we were in our 3rd year before we reached out to marketing help. So we let it grow organically as much as we could for the first 2 years, which was a lot of us doing pop-up markets, a lot of us at arts and crafts festivals.
A lot of hoofing it.
A lot of hoofing it, a lot of hard work. At that point in time, we were not in any store locations. It was just basically through Facebook and Instagram taking orders.
Clearly she's done a really good job at that, because I found, there are several honey beekeepers locally, and everybody said, no, England, that's where you want to go.
Absolutely. So it took time. Like I said, 3 years into actually having the business is when we decided, okay, now let's really put a marketing strategy together. We've kind of grown our base, and it gave us an opportunity to do some research and development, because we're not going to get everything right the first time.
And that is probably the best tip out of all this. You're not going to get it right. Don't expect to get it right.
No,
it's part of the journey.
It is. I can tell you, honey is our main product, but the byproduct of that, of course, is beeswax. So we do some beeswax, hand-poured beeswax candles. I am not a candle maker, and enough YouTube videos and craft shows and things like that, I finally gave it a chance. My first few batches of candles, and I'm a little embarrassed to probably say that I even sold some, or two were probably not high quality. But over time and feedback and learning the process, now we have a very nice line of beeswax candles, and I'm proud to stand behind.
Oh, y'all, it's just really mesmerizing thinking that something that you didn't even know was on the radar has now become quite the passion.
Oh my goodness, yes. They were at Christmas this year. I could not keep up with orders. So
That's fantastic.
that was wonderful.
Anxiety, stressedness at
Yes.
the holiday, but
Yes.
good.
I mean, and there are times still where I take a look when it's a high stress time like that. You know, and I'm sure anyone who was a maker during the COVID times, we couldn't find candle vessels, we couldn't find jars, supplies were limited. And then of course, as we all know, at Christmas time, shipping became such a nightmare. You've got orders to fill, you can't find your supplies, things are delayed. There are times still in small business that you pause and go, is this worth it? Am I doing it right?
Yes, I have hit a few of those.
Absolutely, but at the end, it seems to all be worth it.
It is. You're putting your stamp on the world.
Absolutely.
And you're serving with what you're talented and passionate about.
Yes.
Okay, now let's talk about my favorite part. The pollinators and the flowers and the actual how it's done.
Absolutely.
Because that is just fascinating to me. So you have acreage.
We have acreage.
And you started with one hive.
We started with one hive. Since then, we have expanded to multiple hives. They are all still in our one location because we do have 90 acres. So with that, we are able to spread out quite a bit on our property. Really for us, with the bees, since bees can travel up to 5 miles to forage, we don't need to supplement a lot because we are in such a rural area. We choose to for the health of our bees. So we do pollinator plots on our 90 acres. That's what we'll actually be doing this weekend is
I can't wait to see Instagram feed.
Yes, tilling and sowing seeds. But we try to do it very strategically in the fact that we want flowers blooming for spring that the bees can get. We want them to have something over the summer when in Alabama it gets hot and dry. And in beekeeping, we call that the dearth, which means that there is very little nectar flowing at that point in time for the bees. So we like to have a plot ready to go for them so that we can get them through the dearth without stressing them. And then we like to have flowers into the fall. So this weekend, we will be sowing a little bit of some clover that kind of is natural to this area. We'll also be doing some buckwheat fields. And next will come a variety of regional flowers that we buy the seeds for that are native to this area. So fields of wildflowers. And then we'll finish up the season with sunflowers into the fall.
So how far apart do you need hives? Is there like a specific amount of, you can only have this many hives per acreage?
When you start talking very large quantities of hives into the hundreds, yes. Okay. For us, we're still a small enough operation that that's not a concern for us at this time. We're still at a manageable size of under 20 hives that we can keep them relatively in a close proximity.
So say that they're pollinating and every springtime.
Yes.
So how much honey can come from a hive?
Pounds of honey can come from a hive. And that is an excellent question that I probably should know a more specific or scientific answer to.
But it's probably not the same.
It's not the same. It really depends on the colony itself. And honestly, it depends on the queen bee. If you have a very strong queen bee who is a good layer and is constantly
kind of like a good female,
exactly, constantly reproducing and creating more bees, you're going to have a strong, thriving hive that should be an excellent honey producer. If you have a hive that is a little bit weaker, maybe it did not winter over as well. Maybe the queen is not as I refer to them as super layers. Maybe she's not a super layer. Then that one may not produce as much throughout the year.
Okay. So how often then would you go into harvest?
For us in this area, we should have our first harvest probably early May.
Wow.
And because we have multiple hives, we may only harvest from 2 or 3 hives in May.
Mhm.
And then after that, the next 2 or 3 may be ready. So for us, once harvesting season begins, because we do have multiple hives, we'll be harvesting pretty frequently, but it won't be the same hive.
You're definitely rotating.
We're rotating them through. Now we will go back to a hive we've already harvested from, because we never pull all the honey at once.
Mhm.
We're always leaving frames of honey for the bees. So it's really about just finding that balance of what's going to keep the hive thriving with the amount of honey they need, and what we can take from them. And when we take it, of course, they're ramping back up and producing. So we have some hives that we can harvest from many, many times over the season if they're nice and strong. And some of our smaller hives, our newer hives, we may only harvest once or twice from them. We always stop harvesting in late summer when the goldenrod blooms. That's our sign to stop.
Oh.
Because the bees have to have enough time to produce enough honey for them to winter over. And so that's a good sign that the season is changing. It's time for us to stop and let the bees keep whatever they're going to make from there. Plus, goldenrod honey has a very strong smell to it that smells like gym shoes. And I don't think that would be very marketable.
Well, to each their own. I don't know about gym shoe honey.
But for us, it's really all about the health of the bees and making sure that we are never taking more from them than what they are able to provide for us.
So when you got started with your one hive, did you hire in bees? Did you bring bees in, or did they just come?
That's a great question. We actually get asked quite a bit. Where did the bees come from? There are great beekeeping organizations in this area across the state, and I'm sure other states have that as well. So as part of our initial research, we got plugged into some of these organizations. We were able to find someone who was within an hour drive from us, who was getting ready to split some hives, and shared her bees with us. So we were able to actually take local bees and just kind of move them to our hive. Now you can purchase bees online and they can get shipped in. We do that as well because we want to introduce new genetics into our hives.
Just like a population of humans, you wouldn't want to
Absolutely.
Right. New fresh blood.
Fresh blood coming in. So every year we order in a couple of new packs of bees and bee packages, and they literally get delivered to the post office. And we usually know when they're arriving because we get a phone call about 6 o'clock in the morning from the post office.
Come get your bees.
Come get your bees. But I trade off, and usually our first harvest, I show up at the post office and make sure at least 1 or 2 people get a jar of honey to keep the process smooth.
The gentleman who works the front desk at our post office.
Yes.
Y'all, this little community just really brings a light to my face, because I have not lived in a town long enough since we started moving with the military to feel super connected to the post office. Man, woman, post mistress. And here, he actually just smiles when I walk in.
Yes.
He's like, more packages, more letters. So we actually have, it's really fun going back and forth. But the post service is a huge component when you're working with small, just packages to people.
A small business, right. And you're absolutely right. When I was we don't do a lot of mail order for honey, just because it's best if the honey is local. But the few times that I do ship out to family or friends across the states, he's very kind to me. He's like, are you sure that's packaged well enough? Or let me show you how to do this next time that you come in so it's cheaper for you. So it's great to have that personal connection.
He's hysterical. Well, so we have a small garden in the back.
Yes.
And diligently, since we just got here less than a year ago, I've diligently started the minute we arrived, planting impatiens and zinnias and things that I was really hoping would start bringing pollinators to the backyard. Because we have evil wasps here.
We do.
But we don't have nice things. Like I don't mind bumblebees, but the minute that I planted the cucumbers, I started noticing an increase in bees. Now, yellow flowers, is there a specific color that they like better?
Yellows and reds.
Okay.
They like yellows and reds. But it really is just about offering them a variety. You're exactly right. The blossoms on squash, cucumbers, anything like that, we don't think of that as being something that attracts a bee, but it does. Zinnias are wonderful. Cosmos are really great.
I've got orange cosmos that's not in the color palette.
But it's okay. They will love them anyway. Cosmos are great, and around here they last a very, very long time. What I really love too is to incorporate in my yard at home. I do a lot of container gardening, mixing the flowers in with my vegetables and including a lot of herbs.
Okay, my parents have always said mix your basil in with your tomatoes.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, I always let one kind of go to pot, if you will. Like I let it go ahead and bloom out because the attraction of smaller insects, but bees in particular. And of course you want your tomatoes to thrive because how are you supposed to have tomato sandwiches?
Absolutely. And that's something I think it's hard for gardeners to understand is when you're trying to attract bees with herbs, you do have to let a small portion of them actually bloom, which seems against what we've been taught when we're talking about harvesting and trying to get them to regenerate, but it's true. So basil, I do a lot of basil. I do a lot of rosemary, which you wouldn't think about it attracting bees, but it does. Sage, as well as thyme and oregano.
I love thyme.
Yes.
And I love oregano and I love rosemary, and all those things go great in mixed cocktails too, which I also enjoy doing and sharing with you. If you don't follow me, do.
Yes. So for someone doing a container, if you did a nice coneflower in your container, you know, the painted flower, the desert daisy type of style, and then filled it in with some oregano and thyme so you get some wonderful spillage over that container, that would be a perfect pollinator attraction.
And when your flower then puts for the season, you can change that out for your seasonal, you know, put a mum in.
Right,
and you've still got your spillers because your herbs are going, I mean, seriously, they can last for actually years.
They will last.
Okay, in the South, if the winter doesn't get them, then they will last for quite a while in a container.
I think I have a lemon thyme plant right now that I have had 6-7 years. And I just cut it back as it gets kind of leggy and the dead growth. But there's nothing better than stepping out of your back door and getting fresh herbs, either for cocktails or for cooking.
I was going to say, when you get rid of that thyme and you make your chicken packet, you know, or fresh zucchini and squash in the summer. So, and it's just, everything tastes fresher. Absolutely. And then knowing that you've created an environment to continue healthy living.
Absolutely. Not only for yourself, but for the pollinators as well. So for the bees and of course butterflies too, which I'm starting to see more of.
I'm doing a podcast next week on butterflies.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm so excited.
Yes, definitely.
And hummingbirds too.
Yes.
They love red.
They do.
So you're just enticing a plethora of activity in your backyard. And for the most part, bees, if you have little kids, a lot of times I'll hear, oh, I don't really want bees in the backyard with the kids. You know what? They're not
aggressive. Bees are typically not aggressive. Now, if you're close to a hive where they feel they need to protect their honey supply or their brood, they can have a tendency to I would not call it aggressive. They're protective, just like anybody would be over their possessions. That's why we do wear the bee suits when we're working with them. But just out and about in nature, a honeybee is not going to choose to bother you.
So let's circle back to honey real quick.
Sure.
So you've actually, we have the lovely environment for them. We've created a hospitality, rich, friendly environment. And So they're coming back to the hives where you're collecting.
Mhm.
You're suiting up. You're using the spray that we've already, not the spray, but the
smoke.
the smoke, as
smoker.
we've all seen on any good
Yes.
TV show. You've taken them out. What is that next process? Like, okay, I see everybody's nice and calm now. We're pulling out.
Sure.
How does that
What
work?
happens next?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, we actually run a different variety of hives. We run the traditional hives that you're talking about, where you're pulling the frames of honey out. With those, what we do is we take the honey out, we put them in a special box designed for honey frames. That way, if honey were to drip down, there's a second chamber to catch that honey. Then we take them to a barn that we have where there's water and it's sanitary,
Right.
versus doing it right there in the field. We cut the capped comb. So when a bee creates the honey and they fill it, when the honey is dry enough and reaches a certain moisture level, they cap it off with extra wax.
Isn't that incredible?
It's incredible that they know, like,
they just know.
They're little humidifiers, or dehumidifiers, I should say. So we cut the wax off, and that's where we get some of the wax that we use for our beeswax candles. And then we have a spinner, which is a large machine that you drop the frames into. We're still small enough operation that ours is hand crank. So we hand crank the frame.
Centripetal force.
Centripetal force pulls that honey out, and it flows right out. And all that we do with our honey, so you're getting it straight from the hive. We cut the comb. We put it in the machine that is literally just
looks like a giant salad spinner.
Basically, it's a giant salad spinner. It flows out into a bucket with a fine mesh. It runs through the fine mesh just to catch any large particles of wax or anything there might be in there. And that's it. It's ready for bottling. We do nothing else to the honey. So it is as fresh as it can be. Our other hive that we have is one of them that we have is called a flow hive. That is a specific brand coming out of Australia. And it is one that you do not have to pull the frames out. They are frames that have been made that you can go in there and tap, kind of like a beer keg, where you're going in, you're using a key to tap this comb, and it splits. And the honey literally flows straight from the hive into the jar.
Oh, wow.
So we have a couple different ways of doing it. The flow hive is definitely less labor intensive on the part. But
do you get the full, is the experience on your part the same?
For me, if it's a busy weekend, I would rather do a flow hive. Because I can get up there, tap a couple of hives at once and manage it. Where the other, it's a fun experience.
But it's probably more hands-on.
It is much more hands-on. It's much more labor intensive.
And many more hands.
Many more hands. My kids get involved with it. My parents, who I moved from Indiana down here a few years ago, they get involved in it. My mom, who also did the cottage industry class with me, so her kitchen is also certified, is our main jar. So we get to harvest it, and I take buckets of honey to her house for her to jar the honey.
It's almost like a parade from your land to your mom's house.
Exactly.
I love that is awesome. Okay, well, I'm just imagining this honey flowing out. Do you have any recipes that you love? Like,
yes.
Because I'm a hospitality girl. I love hosting a good event, and always that unique, special touch.
Absolutely.
What people always remember. So
yes. What I like to get across and tell people is honey can be used in anything. Yes, it is a sweet ingredient, and honey is actually sweeter than table sugar. So when you're using it as a substitute in a dessert or a sweet recipe, try to keep that in mind. You may not need to use as much honey, but it can also be used in savory dishes as well. Part of my personal journey is I am trying to learn Cantonese cuisine and cooking.
Oh.
And the reason I love it so much is they are not afraid in their recipes, even savory ones like a Szechuan beef, or I did a wonderful beef and broccoli, where you're pouring honey directly into that sauce and you're getting that extra flavor. So there's great recipes like that. My personal favorite is I love to make fresh bread. I always use honey as in my starter, because it just adds a little extra depth of flavor to the final product of that bread.
Do you do sourdough?
I have not done sourdough yet.
I need to share my 100-year-old starter with you.
Oh, yes.
Because yes, I started, I too use just, and somebody said, well, how much do you use? And I said, I don't know. I go once around the bowl.
Yep.
And that's it. I don't know how much that is. And I know baking is a very specific measurement, but I just go once around the bowl, and it is different.
It adds a depth to flavor. I love it in cocktails as well. Simple syrup is used a lot in cocktails. So you can either make, my favorite cocktail of all time is a French 75.
I was just looking this up the other day.
Love a French 75, which is, gin with a lemony simple syrup topped with Prosecco or sparkling wine. I have made a simple syrup with honey, and then you throw a few lemon rinds in there to get that lemon flavor, and then put it with your Botanical Gin. Hendricks has a wonderful midsummer Botanical Gin.
Oh, I haven't tried that Hendricks.
Yes, that has a little more floral to it. That topped with a little Prosecco is perfection. And I do believe I have that recipe on our Instagram.
Y'all, I will be linking that because do you ever put like thyme or basil in that to add extra?
I have not done thyme or basil. Part of our product line is we do infused honeys. So I will take honeys and infuse them with different herbs or flavors, naturally, of course. So one of our favorite infused and probably our biggest seller is a lavender infused honey that I'm getting the culinary grade lavender. I'm letting it sit in the honey and really get those flavors to come out. And I've done a lavender French 75 before using that. We also do a red pepper spicy honey. That is wonderful. And then a vanilla bean cinnamon stick honey that you can mix match any of those with cocktails or desserts.
See that one being really good with bourbon.
Yes, actually this fall I did a pumpkin mousse bites with that one, and then did a little drizzle on top. And again, I believe that recipe is on our Instagram as well. And the spicy honey, my favorite, which wasn't even my idea, but one of our favorite customers brought it to us. She was doing charcuterie boards, and instead of just putting the little jar of regular honey, she was putting our spicy honey out there. So that as you're drizzling that little spicy honey, you're getting a little bit of that red pepper on it with that cheese bite. And she said it was wonderful.
I love honey and blue cheese too.
Yes, that's one of my favorites.
I mean, that's just, and then some crispy pecans that you've just toasted. Now I'm hungry.
That, and people don't realize it's so easy to honey roast your own nuts. So we did that this Christmas with honey roasted pistachios, and then wound up giving those away as little happies, little gifts.
See, and it's especially in 2020, it's really the small,
absolutely
not small, but the kind gifts from the heart that might be small in size, but big in impact.
Yes. So yeah, I love exploring with honey. I love trying new things with it, and really just getting people to understand that it's not just something that you put in tea.
Which is good in tea.
It's good in tea, but it has thousands of other uses.
Yes. Amy, thank you so much for being here. Okay, so we've talked about being on Instagram. Where else can people follow along and watch your journey?
Absolutely. We do have a website. It is englandhoney.net. It is not active for purchasing right now because we are in our off season, but we do have it filled with pictures of the products that we typically have available, as well as a whole gallery of pictures of our farm. So if you want to see the buckwheat and bloom from last year and see the hives, there's pictures of that. We are on Facebook. We are a little limited on Facebook right now, unfortunately, because Facebook is being a little glitchy with us.
Social media.
I know, but if you want to find us on Facebook, we are on there as well. But Instagram is our main social media outlet right now.
Okay. This has been truly a pleasure. It's a very sweet treat.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first experience doing a podcast, and you've been so welcoming.
Well, thank you very much. And guys, again, leave us a review, thumbs up here on Inspiring Thyme. We are constantly trying to pour into the content and better your entertainment from it and your knowledge. So all reviews would be appreciated. And support local.
Yes.
Do that. We're working hard to make sure we're bringing our very best to the world around us. So guys, until next time, thank you very much.